Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of currently streaming horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews may include mild spoilers. And as always, I hope you enjoy. For today's episode, I'm joined by friends of the show, Berto and Max, to review Andre Overdahl's first English-language horror film, The Autopsy of Jane Doe, which follows father and son morticians who uncover increasingly disturbing clues as to a Jane Doe corpse's mysterious past. Berto and Max, welcome to the show, guys.
What's happening?
What's going on, man?
Nothing much. I'm excited to talk about Autopsy of Jane Doe with you guys and to kind of just hear what you guys think, because this is one of those movies that has basically lived on Netflix for the last few years, and I feel like it's so readily available, and yet I don't hear a lot of people talk about it or kind of like recommend it. So I'm interested to hear what your guys' thoughts on it were, because it's definitely not the sort of big budget horror movie that I think a lot of kind of like mainstream or very accessible horror movies have. But at the same time, I feel like this is a pretty great intro to horror movie for people that aren't necessarily like the biggest horror fans. So Max, I'm interested because you and I have spoken before about how you kind of are getting more into horror, and just kind of like, how did you feel about The Autopsy of Jane Doe coming into it?
This is actually the second time. Well,
oh, perfect.
This is the first time I finished it. I got halfway through it, and then for whatever reason, I didn't finish watching it or ran out of time or whatever. But I think this is a good in between as far as budget is concerned from I Trapped the Devil, which we talked about last week, and then The Ritual, which we talked about a couple weeks ago. They definitely had a lot more special effects, and I think a lot more money went into this one, but it was still a pretty tight movie. You know, like it doesn't seem like they spent a lot of money, especially with kind of the cast they had. But I thought it was great. I thought great twists. Definitely would watch it again or recommend it.
How about you, Berto?
I was on the opposite side. Yeah, I wasn't a fan of it. I mean, to think about it now that if they had like a small budget, I guess it was pretty good. But the movie itself, I wasn't crazy about it. It just felt to me like another hunting movie. Like it just like it was nothing crazy about it. Like I don't know. I wish there was more to it. Like they had a lot of like jump scare kind of moments, but at the same time, I felt like it was almost predictable to me, at least. I wasn't a fan of it.
So for me, the reason I think that this movie is very approachable for a lot of people is that the setup is very familiar and it's very kind of just something that you're used to. Like you said, Berto, it is very much kind of this straightforward traditional haunting movie. Mm-hmm. But then at the same time, and it does have jump scares in it, but at the same time, I think that I definitely appreciated more on a rewatch, just sort of not only just the atmosphere, but how much they're able to do with so little. Because like Max said, it is very much this more tightly constricted kind of environment. And in a lot of ways, it's a single location movie, which is kind of like one of my favorite subgenres in that there's a couple of exterior shots, but the entire movie takes place in this one location, which is the underground, the morgue, basically. And kind of just seeing everything unfold in such a limited capacity or just being restricted to this one location kind of forces the location itself to become a character in a kind of cool way, in that if you can't make that location interesting, then people are going to get halfway through like Max did the first time and not finish it.
Yeah. I personally liked the location. I thought it gave me like a Shining vibe, kind of like it's very old, where like it was like a very old building, like at least the interior looked like, and it was just kind of like them working in this basement, which was also creepy as hell. But I really like the design and the set. I thought it was kind of cool that it has this really like old vibe, and it's very like grimy looking morgue place that I just wouldn't want to be working there for sure.
It kind of felt like a blast from the past in a lot of ways, because I get what you mean. It does feel very dated. Yeah. And I think the contrast between the building being portrayed as being kind of old is indicative of kind of like that profession. And we'll get into it more with the characters later, but that's a big point of contention between the two characters, Tommy and Austin, in that like the son wants to get out of this very antiquated profession, but he feels like he's trapped there. Max, what did you think of the single location storytelling? Did you think it was too limiting, or do you think that Andre, the director, was really good at kind of like getting the most out of that?
Yeah, I think he squeezed every drop out of it as he could out of it. And then, you know, you mentioned the, you know, how old it is. And I think it's a really interesting parallel to what we later figure out, who Jane Doe is, where she is, old, but then she keeps kind of getting more or less remodeled. And so I think in the beginning, Austin was talking to his girlfriend, kind of explaining the building. She's like, why do you work here? And it's a family building. And we took this old building and we keep bringing it up to the modern day. And so I thought there's a maybe unintentional parallel there. And then seeing the outside of the building and then some of the hallways, interiors, definitely very old. And then you have this brand new scientific, pretty modern autopsy room. And so, you have, there's a nice contrast between it. And actually, this is more for Berto. The morgue reminded me of CIA, reminded me of campus, where we had, so real quick, Jay, I know this is totally irrelevant, but our college used to be what was it, a monastery? And so the school bought it, and the bottom floor was actually the morgue. And so, and so it was super creepy. In one of our test kitchens where we took, I think our second term or some practical test, was in the morgue. And so they just retrofitted where they held the bodies, and they just put a stove and refrigerators there. And so there's this.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so I felt this strange connection to that building. Yeah. So like, oh, that's a lot like my school.
Now that I think about it, it has those vibes.
Yeah, and
that's awesome.
Just so people don't get confused, the CIA is the Culinary Institute of America.
Yeah, not the government organization.
Yeah. I don't have feds on this show, so it's all good.
That you know of.
That's it. Yeah, I know. That's a great. That's cool though. That's one of those things that I think. I assume it helped kind of like engross you more, kind of building a sense of familiarity with a setting like that, which is awesome. I always love finding in movies. Not this one particularly, but just movies in general, when you can kind of like find little things that you can connect to, because then it gives you different meaning and a different overall connection to whatever movie you're watching. But in introducing the morgue at the very beginning, I think one of my favorite sequences is just the one where we're basically walked through the morgue. There's that long tracking shot that kind of is walking down the hallways of the morgue, and we see the different rooms. And then it also highlights a lot of the different kind of like locales basically that we come back to, where we see the incinerator, we see the office, but then we also see that mirror that's on the wall or that's in the corner of the ceiling, that reflective mirror that shows you around the corner. And I love how within the first 5 minutes we are given the entire perimeter and area basically of the morgue. And just in that kind of like walkthrough with no interactions between characters and whatnot, it really kind of just captures the isolating nature of the morgue. Because one of the things that I connected this movie to, which I don't think there's any side-by-side comparisons, but this idea that like that movie, The Thing, have you seen that, Max? John Carpenter's The Thing. It's it's a movie where this research team is basically stranded in a research facility out in the Arctic, and there's like a monster inside that tries to get them. But Berto, would you say that there's any similarities in the sense that it's very much this singular location that the people can't really leave? And in being trapped there almost, I think the set itself becomes almost like a antagonist in a way. Like it it kind of captures the emptiness and the isolating nature of that environment.
Yeah, it definitely helps to add to the intensity, because you really know the layout of what it is, and it's so small and so minimal that for at least in the autopsy of Jane Doe, like there's literally only one way in and out, and they're kind of stuck there. And the thing, it's like there's multiple doors that you can leave, but at the same time, I feel like the environment does help to add more. It has its own character in a sense, a lot like this movie.
And I mean, in The Thing, one of the reasons why they can't run out into the wilderness is basically because like they'll freeze to death because they're in Antarctica. And in this, there's an added layer of kind of just like the environmental factor of there's like this torrential downpour storm that's knocking over trees, and there's major flooding and whatnot. So to add on top of the fact that we get into a haunting, like there's this environmental factor that's keeping them there. And I think that just adds not only like an external threat, but at the same time, it fleshes out the atmosphere more, in that like when they're doing the autopsy early on and the lights start flickering and you can hear the thunder and the rain outside, it kind of just makes for a overall like very oppressive environment in a way that I think kind of prolongs that classic haunting atmosphere that you were talking about, Berto.
Yeah, the environment does have, I feel like, back to what Max was saying earlier with the fact that they renewed the outside of the building, the inside was still very old. I kind of like that. I didn't even think about that when I was watching the movie. I was like, oh, they keep remodeling the outside, but the inside is still very old. And I like that now that I think about it. It's a really good connection between that and the character of Jane Doe, which she kind of keeps passing her, I guess her spirit keeps passing down to different dead people, which eventually we find out that it goes to the dad. But I think now that I think about it, it's kind of a cool little, I guess, hidden gem in there that I've never noticed before.
Yeah, and I mean, something that I really appreciated more on a rewatch was Jane Doe as being not really this, her being as important to the other two characters in terms of just like the narrative. Like that, originally, I very much viewed her as just like an antagonist from the beginning, or not even. She's more like just consequential to the haunting, obviously, but like on a rewatch, kind of getting to understand and view her more as being like just as central to the film as the two leads were. Right. And the leads, which I didn't mention earlier, being Brian Cox and Emile Hirsch. What did you guys think of their relationship as father and son? Because this was something else that I thought was really pivotal in terms of just like separating this from kind of the traditional haunting film.
I think that their relationship I felt was pretty strong, and I don't know, I think it might be, a two-part thing where, Brian Cox and Hirsch did a great job acting, and then it also had to do with the writing. There's definitely that sense of, even just their body language and, everything. Tom, Brian's character, seemed to be very proud of his son, very wanted him to be a part of, this family legacy. Austin didn't want to hurt his father. And I think they did a great job. I don't think at any point it was unbelievable. I saw the connection the entire movie pretty much. I don't think there's a point of confusion or I question their relationship.
What did you think, Berto?
For me, it was, I don't know, like near the part where the girlfriend shows up, I kind of had a feeling of like Tom was kind of being held down by the fact that he wanted to make his dad happy just to work there. For me, it kind of got that sense of like, I'm doing, like he was going to go out on a date with his girlfriend, but he's like, the body just got here. And it's like, I kind of want to like help out and I want to make sure that, he's happy. And I think the dad told him like, you can, like, why are you here? Mm-hmm. But at the same time, like, I feel like the inner Austin was kind of like, I want to be here with you. Like, I want to make sure that you're proud of what I'm doing, and trying to help you out and help out the family business.
So maybe just a certain sense of guilt because he knew that he was leaving eventually.
Right. Yeah. That's not something that he wanted to do for the rest of his life. So it's kind of like, I felt like he just kind of wanted to help out the dad while he could.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that their relationship is great because you feel this constant kind of like unresolved struggle between the two of them. And this idea that like, there's a conversation that's looming in the air basically, and neither one of them is willing to address it. And that being his father not dealing with the death of his mother and not kind of just like grappling with that grief. And I think that kind of is what really drives his father's dedication throughout the movie to like finishing the job that he starts, because as things become progressively more and more unsettling when they further the autopsy of Jane Doe and start to unravel the mystery that comes with that, like he is unwavering in his determination, because I think if he ever stops working or moving on to the next body or the next clue, he kind of has to stop and like deal with that grief that he's dealing with. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like he has to kind of address it for the first time in a way that all indications are that he hasn't.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It seems like he's just working to cover up that pain.
Yeah. Do you think his profession, being a mortician, do you think that had to do with his unwillingness to deal with death? Do you think that affected his opinion of death? Because there's a couple instances in the movie between Tom and Austin where Tom said, it's just a corpse. It's just a body. It's nothing to it. And then Austin was like, no, it used to be a person. Like this, this body is important to, like, the why is important. Like, why did this person die? And then Tom was like, no, it's not our job to figure out why. And do you think that further, Tom further pulled away from his, grief, and then, further straining their relationship just based on their profession?
I think part of it has to do with the profession, because it's like you can't look at all of these fucked up bodies as people, because after a while, like, you have to scab over eventually and kind of just be desensitized to it after a certain point. And so I think that his son definitely kind of is representation of maybe like the new class that is actually they're more willing to just reconcile with the fact that, like, these are people that had lives. And at one point he even makes up like a backstory of the first body that he does an autopsy on, where he starts talking about, this is a guy that ended up dying because nobody was there to kind of take care of him, or they weren't there to help him in a moment's need. And his father's like basically giving him tips for why you can't make up these narratives for people. Otherwise you'll go crazy doing this, or you won't be able to last in this profession.
Yeah. It seems like the dad, it's kind of like he's grown this thing where you have to detach yourself from the body, like from those corpses that you're seeing. Like, they're just bodies. They're just almost treat them like animals. Like, you can't be attached to them, because if you start thinking about that, it'll literally mess with your head. And that's what it seems like. His dad being in that industry for so long, he's been running the family business for so long, they kind of already grew that. And Austin is coming into this family business with his fresh mind. And I don't think he's had enough time to really detach himself to the fact that these were human beings before they died.
At the same time, though, there's that scene that, again, when the first time I watched the movie, I didn't really appreciate, when his cat basically gets attacked by a spirit. And his father has to kill the cat, and he puts it in the incinerator, and his dad asks for a moment alone. And we learn that the reason that he has like such a emotional connection to this cat is that it belonged to his wife. And again, that is one of the first glimpses that we see, that while his father's desensitized overall, I think, to dealing with bodies and seeing all these horrible things on a daily basis, at the same time, he still deals with a lot of the grief and things that he tells his son not to deal with, in a way. Like this idea that these are just bodies, these are just things. And yet he's attached an emotional investment to this cat, which is, by his kind of view of the world, like a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he even mentions that he hates the cat. And that,
Yeah.
the only reason
he mentions it to the cop. And
yeah.
But getting back to, before we started talking about the father and son, I mentioned Jane Doe. I was surprised to learn that Jane Doe, who's played by Olin Kelly, they used her actual body for 80% of the scenes, and the other 20% were practical effects. I was surprised to learn that, because I would have assumed, given during the course of autopsying on her body, they would have swapped her out a lot.
Yeah.
Just for a majority. Obviously, when they get to like cutting into her chest and breaking her ribs apart, like they had to stand in for her actual body, clearly. But at the same time, I was just surprised to see that a majority of it was her. And that's why earlier I said she is essentially the third main character, in that, like, it's a very physical performance for somebody that doesn't speak at all. And yet her presence kind of dictates the entire movie.
Yeah. I thought it was almost like a cast, like, a dummy that they just used her likeness. I didn't realize it was actually her. Cause there were a couple scenes, where it was like a minute movement, like I think her nostril flickered once, or she blinked or whatever. So I assumed for those shots, she was there, but I didn't realize she sat on the table.
Well, yeah. I mean, think about it. She's lying on the table
for hours.
Yeah.
Well,
that's why I assumed it was a dummy most of the time, because it's like, how else would you not notice her breathing and all these things? But they said one of Andre, the director, said one of the reasons why he wanted to cast her is that I guess she's big into yoga. And so through her practicing of yoga, she knows how to do shallow breathing and how to control her breathing. So a majority of those scenes, it's her just on the slab breathing, but to the degree that we can't notice, or they could edit around it very easily.
Right.
Which,
they did a great job with that.
It just speaks to the physicality of that role in a very untraditional way. Like when you think about physicality in movies, you think about actors doing all their own stunts and these crazy set pieces that have a lot of moving parts, but you kind of overlook the simplicity of just lying there.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, if not everybody could do that, like I don't know about you, I couldn't lie there and I would just be so focused on not moving that I would probably end up moving constantly.
I'd laugh or say something or fart, do something stupid.
Yeah, exactly. But I really enjoyed the autopsy stuff in terms of just like the mystery that's tied into the autopsy, because for as traditional of a haunting film as this is and how it's presented, there is this very kind of like occult discovery period where they start finding all of these injuries in her body and the realization that she's got broken wrists, she's got broken ankles, and yet there's no marks on her skin. There's no bruising, there's no cuts, there's no tears. And then it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle in that the deeper that they go, the more strange things, oddities that they find with her body. What did you guys think of that whole discovery period?
I think that was probably one of my favorite parts of it. It's like the fact that she's been abused and she's been buried for I don't know how long and she hasn't decomposed yet. I was like, that was very interesting. I kind of like that the fact that her organs were still like in place and they were almost healthy, but they were darkened, I guess, and like they were just older and they seem like they've been through stuff, but like, or stuff has been added to it. And I kind of like that part, of the fact that there was certain mystery to it, that she has been abused, but yet there's no bruise, there's no bleeding, there's no sign of her being injured in any sense, other than the fact that her ankles were snapped. And but like, yeah, I thought it was kind of cool. And I really like the fact that, for me personally, I couldn't, like, if you tell me, like, I thought that was a dummy the whole time. And the fact that she did it, I thought that was kind of really great. And it kind of sticks out more now. I think about it, like, even their practical effect, like, it looked just like her. Like, once they got the dummy, when she was all cut open, I was like, wow, I would have never been able to tell the difference, personally.
Right. And I love how gradual the scares are in matching kind of the pace of the autopsy. Yeah, because it begins with when the father does the Y cut on her chest and starts to dissect her, like her body starts leaking blood everywhere. And obviously bodies are not supposed to do that after they've been, I think he said after 48 hours, they shouldn't. And so when Austin takes the blood sample and puts it in the cooler, he looks back and it's kind of leaked and the vial is rotting. And they just introduce these little oddities early on that, even though the audience knows like shit is just going to get progressively worse, it's nice to see that the scares in terms of the characters, it's like things they can overlook and it's a series of little things they can overlook until you get to like the culminating event at the end of the movie, when it's full blown haunting that they can no longer kind of, these men of science, as it were, cannot explain away any of the oddities, especially like the father, who is very much the naysayer from the beginning.
Right.
Yeah, I thought, as far as the pacing is concerned, that the physical discovery or the physical autopsy matched the pacing of the haunting. When they first bring Jane Doe in, that's when like the storm happened, and it went. I don't know if you remember they had the radio on, and the radio said, clear skies, it's going to be a beautiful weekend. Everyone go outside or whatever. They brought Jane in, and they started essentially, the autopsy, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're going to have a flash storm. The storm, everyone go back inside or whatever, and they opened her eyes. Then like the door starting and the refrigerator started opening, and the more, the deeper they got, the more intense it got. And so like it built this sense of suspense of what are they going to find next? And then what's going to happen, in the bigger picture, what's going to happen next. So I felt the autopsy was kind of a great writing tool to pace out the movie. And then, the autopsy also almost created chapters within the movie. They cut her open and then this happened. They broke her ribs and then that happened. And so, I felt that was a very interesting way to control the pacing of the movie without it getting, so to speak, without blowing its load too quick, or without it being one of these slow burn movies that, takes forever, and then everything happens in the last 20 minutes.
Yeah, it strikes a really great balance. And I really like all of the kind of strange occult things that they start to uncover about the body the further they investigate, where they have the strange bleeding early on, but then they start to find, when they get to dissecting, like Berto had said, you see that her lungs are blackened, as if, I think the father says, she would have had to smoke for 100 years to get lungs that look like this. Or they found a flower inside of one of her intestines, I think. And also they find like slash marks on her organs. And they say, well, if these were surgical, there would be some sign of it on her skin. Like she would have scars of some sort. And so just to see these little oddities that they try to explain away. And then you get to the part where they find a piece of paper with her tooth rolled up into it, or a cloth that has like scripture writing on it. And then eventually when they start to sever her skin, they see that like there's tattooing on the inside of her skin. Like lots of these creepy little moments that, I don't know, it takes something traditional like an autopsy and it applies such a horror element to it that doesn't feel overbearing. It's just kind of very disturbing in a way that I wasn't expecting. That really sticks with me, even on a rewatch.
Yeah, it was
brutal.
I
think the autopsy was very gruesome. Yeah, that's what I found. At least to me, it was like, I was eating lunch when I was watching it.
poor lunch movie.
Yeah, it was definitely bad. I was like, it's gonna be an autopsy. It couldn't be that bad. And then now we get to the part where she's getting cut open. I was like, geez.
I think I like that stuff too because it's so practical reliant.
Yeah,
and not to say that like when we see the bodies that are basically reincarnated later on, those are obviously practical, but those are more jump scare oriented. And I think that when it's focusing on the autopsy scares, it's more just engrossing because it feels like the whole thing is played straight up to a certain point where this feels like, what if this could actually happen? It's not so overtly supernatural that you could immediately dismiss it, because obviously when the corpses start walking around later, you're like, okay, this is clearly like an in-your-face haunting moment, which is fine. And I think for the most part it works. But again, when you're kind of just trapped in that morgue room, the main morgue room, and they've got the body and they're kind of cutting into it and they're finding all these oddities, it's like, oh shit, could this actually happen? Just little moments like that, I don't know, they stick with me really in a way that like when the bodies jump out later is kind of just more of what you would expect from a kind of mainstream haunting movie. But if you guys want to get into some of our favorite moments.
Yeah, do it.
Let's do it.
One of my favorite callbacks constantly is the reflective mirror that's in the corner of the room. I love how they use that. They introduce it during the initial tour through the morgue just to give us kind of like the lay of the land. And then there's that scene where Austin sees a figure in the reflection of it. And he kind of creeps his head around the corner and doesn't see anything. That's kind of like the fake out. And then later when they're trying to board the elevator, they look in it again and there's a body standing there. And then the body comes closer and it's kind of incorporating also the bell ringing that his father tells him and the girlfriend about, where they used to bury people with bells on their wrists because sometimes they couldn't tell if they were still alive or not. And so just incorporating all these little things that have been hinted at early in the film into an actual moment where it's like being used in a scare, I think is pretty satisfying.
Yeah, no, that's definitely, for me, my favorite scene was once we get into the movie, like when the smoke starts building up and you hear there's like someone coming at them, but they can't really see it, and you can hear the bell walking. It's like, he's one of the people that was already dead, obviously, and he has the bell tied up to his pinky toe or whatever, and he's kind of walking. I thought that was kind of a creepy moment when they're trying to get out of there and they're like, oh shit, like it's coming for us. That kind of gave me like a little anxiety moment because they couldn't get the elevator open, but at the same time, like this thing's coming, it's moving towards them as the smoke keeps moving towards them too. So it's like you never really get to see what's coming at them, but they know that you can hear the footsteps and the bell at the same time. I thought that was a pretty cool scene. They did a great job at that.
Yeah, and also because we didn't see, it's the body of the guy that was poisoned, but then somebody shot him in the face or he shot himself in the face, so he has no face, but we never see it. Because just as the girlfriend's about to take off the covering, the boyfriend basically scares her and then they just move on. And so we get brief glimpses of the guy's face after he shot himself because the light starts flickering. Right. And so just the way that that's kind of like sparingly used really makes that scene that much more intense. It's not just the bell ringing. It's like, oh shit, you can't look away because you have this morbid curiosity, almost like you want to see what that guy's jacked up face looks like. How about you, Max?
Just the way I appreciated not really seeing the ghosts or the zombies pretty much throughout the entire movie. We get, like Jay said, the lights flickering and you see the guy, you know, with a gunshot wound. And then when they're trying to get open the door with the axe, the woman with her face sewn up, you get kind of like that instant like jump scare. But I felt it was more unnerving hearing that bell walking through the hallway than if, you know, we saw, you know, the bell walking through the hallway or the silhouette in the smoke. I felt that was scarier than actually seeing the bodies and, you know, seeing the corpses themselves, because just not knowing what they are, like what was, I think, a more powerful effect than, you know, for instance, if it was like a typical zombie movie where, you know, they had these corpses walking around. So I thought the director did pretty well doing that, and it led to a more impactful scene or scenes.
Yeah, it's so sparingly that they show you the monster, which I really love, in that there isn't that much variation between the three corpses that are wandering around the morgue, basically, that become reanimated because of the autopsy that they've been doing on Jane Doe. And I think that being so restrained in that regard, I think really, again, kind of speaks to the pacing of the movie, in that, like you said, Max, he doesn't blow his load too early in terms of scares, and that it plays out really well in a nice way that makes the back end of the film flow in a way that's like more overtly scary in your face. But it's nice because they spent the first half or 3/4 of the movie kind of developing that atmosphere that these scares feel right at home in.
My favorite scene would be in the beginning, or my favorite sequence would be in the beginning where they first started the autopsy, and there's this almost juxtaposition between the father, Tom, starting the autopsy, and then Austin goes, like, they hear a noise outside of the operating room, and so Austin goes to look for it, and he's looking in all the doors, and that's when they discover, you know, the dead cat, or the dying cat. And that's kind of Austin looking for the more spiritual, as you know, the movie progresses. Austin believes almost immediately that Jane Doe is directly connected to all this spooky shit that's going on. The father's like, no, it's just a body, whatever. And so that foreshadowing moment where Austin believes something bigger is going on than what it is, and his father's more like, oh no, don't worry about it. It's fine.
It kind of shows, again, it reinforces the contrast between old school, new school. Not only does the son kind of apply all of this personality to the bodies, and he starts thinking about the backstories, and these are people, these are not just corpses. He's also more willing to believe there's a supernatural reason for what is happening. And like you said, the connection between Jane Doe and the haunting. And again, he's the one that says it, I think he says it twice, like, we should just get out of here.
Yeah.
And again, the father, because he's so determined in finishing what he starts, is like, no, we're going to finish this job. Or he even gives him an out at one point.
Yeah.
He says, oh, you can go. You don't have to stay.
Yeah.
And so that kind of just ties into their larger relationship as a whole.
Yeah. But then a follow-up, sorry, real quick. After I think the bodies were out of the fridges and like the lightning strikes, the lights go out for a second, the father looks at him and is like, let's get the fuck out of here. Like that realization, like, we need, like, like, shit got real. Like, we need to get out of here.
He finally reaches a moment where he's like, okay, I can't discount anything else.
Yeah, we gotta get the fuck, let's get the fuck out of here.
So another scene that I think really stands out is the scene at the end when the father's making basically the plea to Jane Doe to spare his son and instead to take him basically as a sacrifice. And then we get that scene where it's this really awesome kind of montage cutting between Jane Doe and the father, where Jane Doe's body is kind of sealing itself back up and it's essentially healing itself. But then we see that all of her injuries are being transferred over to the father. And so his wrists start getting broken, his ankles get broken. You can tell that his lungs are being blackened like hers because he starts exhaling just smoke constantly. And it's a really great scene that kind of ties into the twist of the movie in that Jane Doe is not a witch. She didn't become a witch, or she wasn't previously a witch. She became a witch because of all of the punishment and torment that she sustained while she was basically living during the Salem witch trial eras, which I thought was a cool twist because the entire time you assume she's like a witch or she's the devil.
Yeah.
And then you find out that being falsely persecuted is what basically created her into becoming a witch.
Right.
What'd you guys think of that twist?
I thought it was an awesome twist. At first, when they were, doing the autopsy, that she was almost like a human sacrifice, and that all the things that were going on around her was whatever demon they summoned, trying to prevent, essentially using her as a gateway into this, into the world. And then, as they keep going down, further through it, and they make the realization that she became a witch through these occult rituals almost. And that she's almost like a living ghost, or like a physical manifestation of a ghost. Because in a lot of these haunting movies, the ghost is, a spirit or a person who was mistreated and then they died. Whereas she was mistreated and then she still kind of lived in some sort of, mummy, curse of the mummy type of deal. And that's kind of, I guess the simplest way to explain it. It's almost, the mummy's curse, but instead of a mummy, it's a witch. And, that tying to, the father pleading with her to try to, save his son. I think there was the sense of denial that goes through a lot of these horror movies where they're like, no, it's fine. We can do it. Don't worry about it. There was that sudden, like I spoke about earlier, the whole, like, we need to get the fuck out of here moment. And then since that point on, it was like all they thought about was escaping. And, Tom was trying to protect Austin, try to get him out, try to protect him, everything else like that. And when they realized that she was, this young girl who was mistreated, and then the sense of empathy for her that Tom started to develop, and she wasn't just a corpse anymore. It was a person who was mistreated and accused. In that moment of, it was like, no, she can't be a witch. Witches aren't real. They're all innocent. She's not a real witch. And then the realization was she became, like, they made her into the monster that she is. Yeah. And I did a little research on the director. He also did Troll Hunter. And I think he did a good job tying in. I don't know if you guys seen Troll Hunter.
I've not.
Okay, no.
So essentially it's a found footage movie. It's a documentary on a guy who, quote unquote, hunts trolls. He's an expert on trolls. And so mainstream media is trolls are monsters, they're terrible, whatever else. But throughout the movie, you learn that, trolls are just an animal, a naturally occurring animal, and they're part of nature, and so there need to be a source of pity for them. And so I think he did a good job in both those movies. You feel there's like maybe 15 minutes I felt bad for Jane Doe because she was tortured, and you kind of feel bad for the monster for a little while. And likewise for Troll Hunter, I felt bad for the trolls, that they were misunderstood, they were mistreated and everything. And so I don't know if that's like his writing style or his directorial style, but I felt that was an interesting twist as well. Like, you felt she went from a demonic entity to someone to be pitied and felt bad for, and then you go back to, she's still evil.
I mean, it's smart because, again, in making Jane Doe feel like an extension of the protagonists, she has an arc just like them, even though she doesn't have any dialogue. And it's more of an emotional arc because they said I was listening to a roundtable with Brian Cox and Emil Hirsch. They were saying that initially going into the movie and making it, they treated her like a thing, basically, and not like a character, which I mean, that fits for the beginning of the movie because she's a body. And so this idea that they're supposed to be desensitized to dead people for a certain extent and view them as things, it makes sense. But then in the more that we start to know her and understand who she is and her history, it really becomes about the fact that this is somebody that you sympathize with, even if they're already dead, because you learn all and you see the firsthand result of what she endured when she was alive, and you build sympathy off of that. And then, of course, she still ends up wrecking shop and killing everybody, and furthering the haunting and breaking this kind of faux promise to the father that she'll let him live. And I just wasn't expecting that, and I think I appreciated it a lot more on a rewatch, just how emotionally invested you become in a character that doesn't speak once and doesn't react, and you don't see them like physically moving or reacting to things. I just thought that was really interesting.
I personally I did like the twist. I thought it was kind of cool. I wasn't expecting the fact that she was still going to end up killing everybody in the room. Like she was still going to kill the dad and the son, which I wasn't expecting that. So it was kind of a shocker, which I kind of liked. But I really did like the twist, the fact that she was like, the dad pleaded with her and she was like, sure, let me take your body. And then it's like, at the same time, it's like, no, screw you. I'm still going to kill everybody because I don't care. Like I still suffered and I went through this pain, and basically it's like, she's getting revenge on everything that happened to her. I thought that was kind of cool. I did that twist for a second had me confused. I was like, because they found once they found the kid's body, I was like, there's no blood. So in my head, I was like, there was no blood on his shirt. So I was like, in my head, I was like, was that all in his head? That's what I was kind of confused about in the ending.
No. Did the cranial test where they, sawed her, opened her skull up and like took the brain tissue and they're like, oh shit, like, no, she's still alive. And it's like, that's impossible. How she, like, we took out her heart. Like, there's no way. And And I don't know if you guys noticed it, but the facial expression of Jane Doe kind of changes through the movie as they start to discover who she is. It's something very subtle, and it may have been me looking for it, but it goes from, like the actual cadaver, her eyes are open, she looks kind of in pain, to kind of a smug look. I don't know how to put it. She almost looks satisfied. I don't know if you...
Is it less of her face is changing, or it's more the perspective in which her face is being shot?
It might be a point of both, because they do move that block from behind her back to right behind her head, and it just seems like, it almost seems like the character changes based on how she was shot, and it may be due to the fact that I understand more about her, the characters understand more about her, and so things may have changed, especially when the father pretty much offers himself for some closure as a point of take me as revenge. I'm sorry for everything that happened. Let me help you. And then, to me, it seemed like her facial expression shifted, or she was starting to shift, especially in the back of the ambulance at the end of the movie.
Yeah. So I think something also that I didn't really appreciate was the sympathy that you build for her character and then going straight into kind of just being terrified of her.
Yeah.
It really plays into just how much of a gut punch the ending is. And it's an ending that I still really, really enjoy, in that it's kind of this mean-spirited ending where we think that the father has made this bargain that basically saves his son. And then we hear when the son is about to climb through the shutter basement door, we hear the cop's voice. And then he keeps trying to open the door and he's like, it won't budge. And then you hear the cop start singing the song that was on the radio.
That was
like
creepy.
That's the perfect creepy, oh fuck.
Yeah.
Like, Houston, we have a problem moment where we know his fate before it even plays through.
Right.
And that, of course, he turns around and he sees his mummified father behind him and he falls off the ledge. That's probably one of my favorite kind of, I wouldn't say it's a twist, but just like a gut punch ending where you have the rug pulled out from under you because you've been led to believe somebody's given a second lease on life, essentially, and then it's just completely taken away from them.
Yeah. I thought that music, the radio being played every time they're like doing the autopsy on her, I thought that was the creepiest thing. And that definitely at the end, when the kid's like trying to open the door and the cop goes from saying, we we can help you or something like that, to like singing that song. I was like, holy shit, that's very creepy. I thought that's probably one of the scariest things for me about the whole movie, was just that subtle of like, it seems like such a happy song, but when you start listening to the lyrics, it's very like creepy and dark.
Yeah.
And for me,
it reminds me of like a cult.
Yeah.
It seems like something a cult would sing before everybody drinks the Kool-Aid.
right. Yeah, so I feel for me, it's like, I wasn't a big fan of the movie in general, but like that little moment of like having the old school 1950s creepy music, kind of like Jeepers Creeper kind of thing, that kind of freaked me out. I really like that they added that to the movie. But I mean, for me overall, like I thought it was all right. And now that like we're talking about it, I feel like I missed a lot of these subtle moments, like Max was explaining, like her changing their face. I feel like I need to go back and rewatch it. But overall, I mean, for me, it was like, it just didn't do it. I was still confused about the ending, because like, was it all in the kid's head? Because at least, or maybe they screw up in the editing, because his shirt was covered in blood, and then like once they found the body on the floor, his shirt there was no blood on it. So I was kind of confused as to what the situation.
It's never explained, but I think it ties into this idea that the body is erasing all the evidence that something strange happened. And something that I picked up on the second time I watched it that I didn't on the first time is that he's all excited that he's basically like, his father made this deal with the demon. He's free to go, essentially. Just because he's free of the demon, though, all the evidence suggests that he killed his father and his girlfriend.
Right.
So even if he gets out of there alive, in all likelihood, even if we didn't have the ending that we ended up with, he's going to go to prison because he stabbed his father, and his girlfriend is dead, and his fingerprints are all over the axe. And it's like, nobody's going to believe anything he has to say about a demon killing them.
Right.
So it's kind of like, it feels into this kind of just nastiness of the movie, in that it's very uncaring or not willing to lend the sympathy to the protagonist that we were extending to the antagonist earlier in the movie.
And to answer Berto's question, and I guess part to what Jay was saying, that she was erasing all the evidence or kind of resetting herself when the dad offered himself up as a sacrifice, and she was kind of projecting her injuries onto him. The blood that, when she bled out, the initial cut, it moved back into her body. You saw it kind of reversing up and out of the drain. And so she could have just, I guess, reabsorbed the blood.
Sucked up that blood.
Yeah. And
you see like you see the scarring on her organs is disappearing.
Yeah.
Right.
And obviously like her chest cavity starts to fuse back together.
Right.
And I mean, we saw that when they lit the body on fire, that all the evidence that they collected is gone.
Right.
The camera is burnt. The photos are burnt. There's the scribblings on the chalkboard, but
there's no
that could be whatever.
Yeah, there's no context to it.
Yeah.
And I thought,
exactly. There's no concrete evidence.
Right. And I thought there's a good, the final sequence when the sheriff comes and he has a deputy with him, and she's like, what the hell happened here? Like, did he do this? And the sheriff is like, no, I've known this family for 20 years. Something else has gone on. Like, every time, this is the second time where we've walked into, a massacre, and she's okay. The body is untouched in the center of everything, and everyone else around her is dead. So get her out. Get it. Like, get her out of my county. She's someone else's problem now.
Right.
Yeah. And so
I like that ending too. That decision to bounce the body to the next county. It's like the domino effect. Essentially, the buck doesn't stop with anybody. So you could potentially see this occur in the next town, the town after that, and so forth. And it's just this endless cycle
already.
Right.
I guess they said the date on the cloth was like 1693, and I'm assuming the year of the movie is pretty close, modern time. So 300 years. She's just been bouncing around from county to county.
Mm-hmm. I love too that they have that moment where I'm pretty sure the movie takes place in New York or New Jersey, because they reference New Jersey when one of their hypotheses is that she's basically like a human sex trafficking victim. And the father says that he's seen injuries like that before associated with human trafficking. And then when the son deciphers the cloth parchment that has the scribblings on it, he's just like, New England. Like New England is the root of all evil, essentially. As a New Englander, that really stood out to me, as just being like, this perception of New England just being this this place of ancient evil.
Yeah.
But I like that last scene also where the body is in the car. And it does kind of, because when I watched it the first time, I was trying to decide whether part of this was a hallucination or not. And then the music starts playing on the radio, and then we see the body and we see the toe and it moves and it rings the bell as the last little kind of just nod to this idea that this is very much a haunting and there's no mistaking whether or not that really happened or not.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like for me, I was really hoping more of to see her move at least once. That's what kind of bugged me out the whole time, because she was just very still, and like obviously her spirit was hunting everything else around her. But I was kind of hoping that had she like moved, or there would have been a scene where they go back into the autopsy room and her body's just gone. And it's like, holy shit, like what happened? Like we just cut her open and she's fully open. Now she's missing. Like what's going on? I don't know. For me, it really bugged me that the fact that she was just sitting there still and there was all this chaos going around her and she just didn't seem like to move. It really bugged me out.
And what's strange, I gotta say, I think the opposite. That I think if she was moving around, or had a more physical influence, I think it would have turned this into more like a more typical haunting movie. I think the mystery of, from the beginning that she has to do with it, but like how much, making her the epicenter of this, but her not moving at all. And it's kind of her playing possum. I mean, she is playing possum. I mean, she's dead, but she's not actually dead. I thought that worked as far as a mystery element to her part in it. But if she just got up at the table, then you're like, all right, it's evil. Like she's walking around with her chest, the chest cavity open. Then I think it would have been.
I think that is what, in making her just serve as a cadaver, albeit a haunted one, it really does force the movie to focus on the autopsy elements of the movie, which I think gives this movie its entire personality in that it really does differentiate itself from a lot of other haunting jump scare movies, in that there's this kind of discovery period. It's almost like a CSI kind of subplot where they're literally picking apart her body and finding these clues to give some indication of largely what happened to her. And to intercut that with the jump scares that I think are probably the weaker parts of the movie, just in terms of they're very much along the lines of what you would expect. But at the same time, I think that when you kind of have this new angle and you combine them with something that's very familiar, it makes for something that's more unique, because I would much rather have the autopsy stuff and the mystery involved in that section than more jump scares, or kind of like you guys said, her sitting up and her chest cavity's all exposed. And it's like, well, they've already cut her to pieces. So seeing her walking around with parts of her cut off, it's like not going to have the same impact, I feel like.
So Berto, what was your expectation? Were you expecting something closer to like The Conjuring or Conjuring or The Shining, like a more involved?
No, I felt more of the Conjuring style of just like creepy demonic stuff. I wasn't really I don't know. It just, for me, it wasn't as creepy as I would have imagined having like kind of like a Conjuring style to it. Like to me, it was like, yeah, there are dead bodies, but the bodies also, like the ones that were walking around, didn't really seem so creepy. Like the lady did have her eyes and mouth sawed together, and the other guy had a hole in his face, but it wasn't that creepy to me, at least. And I felt like there was that one scene when they're in where they run into that room and the dad's checking himself in the he's like trying to heal himself up because he cut himself, and he's like washing his hand, and he sees a shadow in the behind the sheets in the bathroom, and this sounds like dad, and then it's like there's nothing there, and he kind of takes a deep breath, and I was like, well, something bad's about to happen, because he's like too relaxed. Like it just seemed
that's
to me,
the fake out.
Yeah, that scene was like very predictable. I was like, all right, he seems too relaxed, something's gonna go down. And then I was like, he gets pulled in and the door gets shut, and it's like, well, that was kind of predictable in that sense. But for me, I would have looked more into like a Conjuring style, which that's probably one of my least favorite.
It's funny that you mentioned The Conjuring, because that was the inspiration for the director to make a horror movie.
Oh yeah.
To make this.
Yeah.
Like the director watched The Conjuring when it came out, and he told his producers or his agent rather, that he wants to find a script to make a horror movie in a similar sense to that. This idea that there's a haunting of some sort. And this script really was what drew in all the talent to it. Because like we said at the beginning, this is a pretty small budget horror movie that I think is all about atmosphere in a lot of ways rather than a bunch of in your face kind of special effects. Yeah. And so the script itself was what attracted Brian Cox. Emile Hirsch is a great actor, but Brian Cox has a talent that I think he's of a level that you would assume somebody with his pedigree of acting would overlook horror a lot of the time. And one of the things that he said that drew him to the project so much was his relationship with Emile Hirsch character and how it's this very conflict heavy, but you don't see a lot of argument between the two of them. Right. It's kind of like the elephant in the room that neither of them is willing to address.
More body language.
Is something, exactly. It's all, you can kind of read into the nuances of their performances that there's a conflict there, and yet they never really have a big blow up moment between the two of them.
Yeah. For me, I felt like it would have been more scary had we seen like for me, those dead bodies that were walking around, just like, it just felt like a zombie movie. Like they were just zombies. Had those things been able to like kind of crawl on the wall or do some kind of crazy supernatural kind of thing, I felt like it would have been more creepier other than just have them like walk around and make noise and just have that sense of you're being followed. I would have been more scary for me.
I feel like they could have shown more, which is not something that I usually say, but it is an R-rated movie, so they could have shown more if they wanted to. Yeah. And especially once you see it once they start becoming more frequently shown, in the third act of the movie, you could show them completely at that point because we hadn't seen them.
Right.
So I agree that if they had maybe tweaked we'll call them zombies for the moment, if they had tweaked the zombies a little bit, they could have been more effective because you're right. I think they were pretty limited in what they did with them. Right. That's probably has to do with the budget of the movie, but if you're going to go to the trouble of having them like have their eyes and mouth sewn and all that, like you could probably think of one or two more disturbing things to do.
Yeah.
I will say that also the emphasis on practical effects in this that are so good, they really make the moments of CGI like be kind of an eyesore, like with the fire.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a nitpick thing, but like when they set the body on fire, the fire just looked so incredibly fake compared to the stellar practical effects and whatnot. That kind of just stood out to me.
Yeah, like that one moment of CGI for me, it kind of like ruined the whole part of the movie for me, because it was like, you have this, like you said, it was a small budget, so I'm sure their CGI was very minimal, but I feel like everything just seems so practical that it was kind of nice to see that, especially nowadays where you have everything's mostly CGI. It's much cheaper, I guess. But to me, that one scene was kind of gnarly. It's definitely not my favorite one.
Any other moments that you guys wanted to touch upon that we forgot to?
I think so. I think the girlfriend getting chopped up, that was kind of, I wasn't expecting that. That was kind of a curveball for me. I thought he was just kind of swinging at something and his dad was going to get yanked in there. Like he was just going to get pulled out of the elevator. And then you find out that she's just literally chopped in half, or not chopped in half, but she's got cut on her chest.
I thought, so that might have been, like Berger was saying, that he's expecting, like that bathroom scene, he's expecting the dad to get kind of beat up or something was going to happen. I kind of I didn't expect the girlfriend to be there, but I expected, it to be an illusion that, maybe it was the sheriff, but it wasn't, the dead body that they were anticipating. Putting the axe in the girlfriend's chest, that was definitely kind of an oh shit moment, but
right.
I'm saying I was kind of expecting it, because they're building up such suspense for that one scene. I was like, what's the twist going to be? And I was satisfied with the twist, but
that scene is a great example of, I would say it's pretty ballsy for a director to lean so hard into having so little compassion for his characters. I feel like in a lot of horror movies, even in R-rated ones, there's always this, you don't want to alienate the audience too much, that all of a sudden they start rooting against the director because the director's doing these horrible things to characters that they've spent the entire movie investing you in. So in that regard, I think it really works for me just because it kind of complements the overall nastiness of the movie and this kind of unapologetic nature that I usually fault a lot of. It's mostly PG-13 movies that reel it in a little too much, but even for being an R-rated movie, I was surprised how unapologetic he was and what he did to the characters.
As far as the girlfriend was concerned, I wasn't too invested in her character. because we only saw her for maybe 5 minutes, and I thought I forgot. I think the father killing her created a new level of separation between the father, between the father and the son.
Yeah.
Because there was.
Can't think of anything else that would drive more of a wedge between two characters.
Right. Yeah. You put an axe in my girlfriend's chest, and then just that tension between them that's already in the room. I think Tom knows that Austin's going to be leaving soon. There's something there. And then, the mother and now the girlfriend. And so it goes from, they're still trying to survive, but now, Austin's brokenhearted. And I think that segue into talking about the mother, which Tom eventually just kind of brushes off. I think that was a very anxiety inducing moment.
For me, I felt like that moment, like when you find out that the girlfriend got killed, for me, like in the movie, I was like, well, now is this all in their head? Are they hallucinating? Because how does she get in here? Because they're literally trying to get out, and there's only two ways, the elevator or that door. And it's like, for me, the whole time, I was like, after that scene, I was like, well, I feel like now they're probably hallucinating because it's all in their head, because how did she get in here? They've been trying to get out of here for this whole time. And it's like, well, was she either stuck in here or will like something happened? So I was like, for me, it was kind of confusing at that point. I was like trying to think, it's like, well, they must be hallucinating. There's no way this could be real.
I feel like it's one of those things where the spirit is controlling everything, basically. So it's convenient that there's a storm because they can discount a lot of things that happen, just blame it on the storm. But in reality, the spirit has been awoken, especially when they cut open her body, that it can control things. So the idea that anything can happen, essentially at that point, it's all up to the spirit, and they can manipulate all these different factors so they can start to do things to you that you would never expect, because it's like, well, the power's out, so of course there's nobody else in the building, when in actuality, the spirit can allow anything to happen.
Right. So they touched on it very briefly. So Austin told his girlfriend to come back and get him, if she doesn't hear from him in a while. And so the reason why they go to the elevator in the first place is because they hear the elevator door open. They hear the elevator get to the bottom floor and open back up. And then they say, oh, the elevator, let's go. The elevator still works. And so, perhaps the spirit knew that his girlfriend came back, let the elevator work so she would come down, and then, manipulated their perception enough to kill her, pretty much. It's good. That was a good, I think that was a good character development moment, I felt.
Yeah, I think that this is one of those movies that gets overlooked in that it is very traditional, like Berto said, in terms of just the setup for a haunting movie, and yet there is this added layer of depth to the characters and the development of those characters that I think it gets overlooked a lot. And even I overlooked it the first time I watched it, and it just makes for a much more engaging take, and a kind of the CSI stuff, like I said, is a more unique take on a very conventional kind of haunting film. Yeah. But I think this is a great kind of introductory to horror movie again, in that it is very easy to kind of just like summarize what it is, but then in summarizing something that's so simplistic, I think there's a lot of room for it to surprise people in a way that they probably aren't expecting.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of points that you can pull apart. Since you don't really focus on so much of the they're definitely well done practical effects, but it's not, a movie with 3 or 4 settings or, a bunch of characters or a bunch of history and lore behind it. I think he does a good job in doing almost, character building, world building, and history all in. I don't know how long the movie is, but it's
like 90 minutes.
I think
a little longer.
Very efficient in what it did.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially with that singular location. Again, coming back to that, just the idea that you're able to tell such a multi-layered story and have multiple like you said, there's not 3 or 4 locations, or in terms of different locations, but there is kind of like this singular location that's rich in several different, like, differing environments and whatnot. They're not necessarily different locations, but at the same time, you can keep telling the same story in a unique way and have it bleed out into these different areas of the morgue. But I really appreciated having you guys on to talk about the autopsy of Jane Doe.
Yeah.
Fun.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. I'm hoping in the next time we'll find one that Berto enjoys a little bit more.
Right.
But getting used to having more people on just so we can get more conflicting opinions, because I think that makes for some pretty interesting conversations.
Yeah.
But I appreciate you guys coming on.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to Daily Horror Habit on your preferred streaming service and follow @Daily Horror Habit on Instagram and @Daily Horror Pod on Twitter.